My mind is so restless at the moment, especially when I go to sleep. Can you share a thought on how to let go more easily? Okay, such a good question. The number one reason that the thoughts are restless, the thinking mind is like a train, and it just goes and it goes and it goes and it goes. And usually we're living in this box of the mind, completely separate from our physical bodies, from the sensations in our bodies, from the emotional feelings we're having, from our physical environment. We're just thinking about the past or the future endlessly. And the reality is we live in two worlds. We live in the world of the present moment, which is where real life happens, where actual life is. And in the present moment, we source from something much greater than our limited identity. We also live in another world, which is the world of the story, the storyline. And on the storyline or the timeline, that's really where my persona is, where the story of your life is, birth and death, past and future. And most people are constantly on the timeline, which is really like living in the mind, because it's just a story. It's just ideas of who we think we are. So when restless thoughts are happening, it's really good to just be aware. I'm having restless thoughts and they have a hold of me right now. Usually what the thoughts are doing is they're pulling us out of the present moment, taking us into past or future. The restless thoughts are really about avoiding, typically feeling. And I'll go deep into this in the second part of the video, is how to release yourself from emotional triggers so that you're not being bombarded with overthinking, which is a strategy or an addiction to avoid uncomfortable feelings. How often throughout the day, what's the percentage of time that you are in the present moment versus the story or timeline? How often are you present with life? So when you're washing the dishes, like present with the water, you don't have to use your mind to wash the dishes. So instead of thinking about something else while you're washing the dishes, bringing your full presence and self to the sponge, the cold water, the feeling of the dish, that sort of thing. So it's an experience, an embodied experience, rather than going through the motions but being somewhere else. That divide is what creates a lot of restlessness, a lot of addiction to overthinking, a lot of exhaustion. So we train ourselves home into the present moment. And so we're rooted and grounded rather than lost in this like really excited energy, and then we can't fall asleep and the body's being neglected and abandoned because we're always in our head creating something or dwelling on something. Let's take a break. Let's take a moment. So taking a few breaths here. It was so fun gathering with these amazing souls. It's just so energizing. You know you're on track when you feel energized after being of service. You know you're doing your soul work. So now I want to give you an experience. Let's say you are dealing with restless thoughts and you are dealing with a lot of emotional triggers. Oftentimes, emotional triggers will send us into this overthinking because it's the ego's strategy to free us from a painful past or from pain that is too much to feel. And that strategy is maybe helpful when we were little kids and we couldn't manage it all. But at this point in our lives, it's important to be responsible, to have psychic hygiene, to have emotional hygiene, and to start feeling our feelings, okay? If we don't, in the Diamond Process book, I go way into this. It's like most of us are carrying around these sacks of rubble, rock and rubble. And it's all the repressed, rubble is an acronym, repressed unconscious beliefs and blocks of locked up emotions. So it's like these beliefs that are really limited and painful, and all of these emotions that just have never been felt. They've just been like swallowed and like move on. And so when we feel what we feel, we start to unpack those rocks and life gets lighter and peace becomes stronger. And we no longer, eventually the sack empties out. We don't even need the pack. And so we're just free. We're walking in the present moment most of the time, and we're home, married to the beloved, just feeling a safety that's beyond understanding. It's a safety that doesn't depend on outer world stability, which, if you haven't noticed, Not that it's ever actually stable, but right now it's very clear that the outer world is always changing and it's never actually stable. It doesn't stay the same. It's like this kaleidoscope that's always changing and shifting. And if we try to latch on to something in the outer world for our safety or stability, it's a slippery slope. So that can create a lot of restlessness in the mind too, because it's not actually natural to depend on outer circumstances in order to feel safe unless you are an infant or a toddler or a small child. As we are adults awakening in consciousness, it's really important to tie ourselves to what is always stable, to what is always here, and that is the present moment, no matter what the present moment brings. There is a dimension of the self that I call the diamond self that is able to be with all of life, good and bad, no matter what's here, as if you're watching weather patterns like in the sky. There's no attachment to it, no identification with it. It's just responding to what is without a big story and drama around it, without overthinking it. Here's the beautiful thing. Your body, my body, our physical bodies don't know how to leave the present moment. They physically cannot leave the present moment. They are always in the present moment. The mind may go to the past future. That's where the mind lives, the thinking mind. But the body is always here. So when we connect with the sensations in the body, the feelings in the body, and we actually place one hand on the heart, one hand on the belly, we start to open up to the present moment and ground and root into our breath and our body. Powerful stuff, because now the nervous system can relax. The body doesn't feel neglected or abandoned anymore, which is what happens when we're constantly creating, thinking, worrying in the mind. Now the body, which is an entity in and of itself, just like we care for a plant or an animal, we get to care. How cute is this, by the way? We get to care for our bodies just the same. And one of the ways we do that is by being with our bodies. So I like to literally, when I get in bed at night, I give myself a huge embrace, even though Jason's right next to me. I just jump in bed and I'm just like, oh, I love you so much, V. And I just hold myself, because it is such a loving gesture to the physical body. Now, the nervous system relaxes because we are mammals. The nervous system relaxes when we have physical touch, and you don't actually need somebody else, although it's wonderful to have that physical touch. You have hands and you have breath and you can embrace yourself. Now, the key is to don't let the sensations or the feelings become thinking. So if there's a lot of creative thoughts, jot them down and then put the journal aside and say, okay, now it's time for sleep, and let it go and just witness the thoughts and then come back to the body breathing. And it's important to do this if you have restless thoughts at night. To do this during the day, like meditate, have a practice, have an earthing practice out in nature, anything that helps you get grounded so that your roots get really strong, your presence roots, so to speak. Your connection with that lifeline to the present moment gets really strong and stable. So you're physically here without constantly thinking, all the commentary, all the noise in the mind. Then when you're in bed, it's going to be a lot easier to be grounded and rooted when you're doing that at times when it's easier. Now that you're in bed, if you're having the restless thoughts and you're holding yourself, I'm here with you, I'm not leaving, is a very powerful mantra. Present with the body, breathing, staying with the breath, staying with the sensations in the physical body, and just almost holding yourself the way you would hold a child or snuggle a loved one or a pet. And bring that same love to your physical existence. So it's not thinking, it's just feeling the warmth of your body, the breath moving in and out, and use that as a meditation until it helps you fall asleep.